My mouth is watering, and we're going to be talking about Butter Tarts. Yeah, Albertans have had their share of petitions circulating over the last number of months, from separatist, united petitions, recall petitions. Here's one petition I think we can all jump on. National Butter Tart Day. John Meissner of Grimsby, Ontario, is behind the petition. He joins us this afternoon. Good afternoon, John.
Good afternoon.
Before we get to your petition, let's start with the origins of the Butter Tart. Where did it all begin?
Yes. Let's begin with that. Okay, so a lot of our Canadian treats that we enjoy, such as apple fritters, for example, stem back to our pioneering heritage, back to the 1800s, when we had people coming here from France, from Scotland, from England, and mixing their culture with, obviously, the indigenous culture. So a lot of the things that we enjoy today, such as the apple fritter, stem from that heritage. The apple kukla, which essentially is taking the core out of an apple, slicing it into rings, dipping that in batter and deep frying it, evolved into the apple fritter. The bannock bread, which has Scottish and Indigenous heritage, that is the second cousin to the beaver tail. When you take that and cover it in cinnamon sugar, deep fry it, it's essentially the beaver tail. So we owe a lot of these Canadian treats that we enjoy every day to our pioneering heritage. And Mrs. Malcolm Mary McLeod of Barrie, Ontario, is documented in the year 1900 as being the first person to actually write that recipe down in a cookbook. It was the Women's Auxiliary Cookbook of the Royal Victorian Hospital. And Simcoe County Archives has a copy of that book. And that's kind of the origin story of the Butter Tart.
I wonder if there's anyone listening right now saying, a butter what? I can't imagine it, but maybe we should remind those listeners what a Butter Tart really is.
Yes, we should. And if you have the opportunity to look at Mary's recipe, it starts with butter. I mean, that is the star of the show. If you're not tasting butter, you're just eating a tart. And what brought us to this petition is I've been a Butter Tart Festival judge, and I've tasted some really good Butter Tarts. But I've also tasted some Butter Tarts that I just shook my head and thought, what you're calling this? This is a butter that no, it's not. It's not even close. So what happened to kind of spur on the petition is I was at a festival recently, and there was 6 judges on the judging panel, and there was one Butter Tart that every judge immediately, as soon as it entered our mouths, we spat it back out on the plate. It was so bad. And it kind of got me thinking, what has happened to this recipe for Butter Tarts that when you look at the original recipe, it is so simple. It's a masterclass in simplicity. It is eggs, butter, and sugar. And what's happened is over the years, we've kind of morphed it into whatever people think a Butter Tart should be. And it's interesting because I had one person say to me, a Butter Tart can be whatever it wants to be. And I'm like, well, it really can't, because if I was to take mashed potatoes, cover them with tomato sauce and mozzarella cheese and call that poutine, people in Quebec would be out for my throat, right? So a Butter Tart can't be whatever it wants to be. It should be made with butter. That's the star of the show. It's in the name.
Wait a second. When you say, okay, butter, but when you say sugar, does it have to be white? I use brown sugar.
And so you should.
Oh, good.
The original recipe calls for sugar, but over the years, people have come up with different ways of sweetening their Butter Tarts. I've seen Butter Tarts that use sweetened condensed milk. Not really a fan of it. Corn syrup is a big favorite. Among a lot of people who I think don't really know how to bake. So instead of understanding the process of making, taking the eggs, the butter, and the sugar and mixing that together into your filling, they just basically take a pie tart, fill it full of corn syrup, and throw a raisin in it and call that a Butter Tart. And that's not even, again, it's not even close.
Was that the one you spit out? Was that the one you spit out? What was the one you spit out? Yeah.
The one I spit out was really, it was something. The crust, it didn't even taste like like what you would think a Butter Tart crust would taste like. Okay. It actually tasted like a deep fried pierogi. And that just, it just was wrong on so many levels. But But anyhow,
Okay.
we're not
now
here
we're
to talk
back
about the bad ones. We're here to talk about the good ones.
We're,
right?
we're talking about the good ones to the point where you're saying the Butter Tart needs its own national day. And frankly, being in radio for the years, there's always National Toilet Paper Day, National Hot Dog Day, and I don't really care. But when I heard about National Butter Tart Day, and I thought this is truly, I'd like to think it's truly Canadian, right? Because Mary McLeod came up with the recipe or wrote it down when she was in Canada, correct?
Yeah. Oh, and she was Canadian her whole life. I mean, there's no record that says otherwise.
Right. So I
she's
think
a Canadian.
this is great.
Yeah.
But okay, so some people could go to the point where I do like butter tarts. John, you went the next step and said, let's push for a National Butter Tart Day. Tell me about that.
Well, I did, because when I came back from that festival, I started doing some research into our pioneering history. And my family has been in Canada for 200 years, actually this year. My great-great-grandfather, Matthias Fehrenbach, came to Canada in 1826. And just to kind of give you a visual of what it was like back then, he and his wife, Agnes, for the first little while, they lived in a treehouse to protect themselves from the elements and from the wild animals. And they couldn't just run down to the grocery store and grab, the ingredients for butter tarts. They had to use what they had on the farm, the eggs, the flour from our great prairies. It wasn't this processed, manufactured sort of treat. It was something that she would have made. So it took me down that road of our pioneering heritage. And there was a lot of interesting things that I found out about, how the ingredients kind of morphed over the years. World War II certainly had an impact on the price of sugar. And then if you're old enough to remember, around the end of the 70s and the early 80s, during what was called the Great Grain Robbery, when Russia bought up a lot of North American grain, it left corn producers in the United States with a surplus of corn. And that's kind of how corn syrup sort of really became prevalent. And if you remember back in that time frame, that's when Coca-Cola came up with New Coke. They changed the recipe from using sugar to using corn syrup. And what happened to New Coke? It didn't last a year. Everybody lost their minds. And within a year, Coca-Cola came back to the original recipe and branded it as Coke Classic.
You're a wealth of information. Get back to the butter tarts.
I am. I'm like Cliff Clavin. I'm a wealth of useless information.
Hey, Norm.
So anyway, so getting back to the butter tarts. So when I came back from this festival and I thought, what has happened to this recipe? I started digging into Mary McLeod, the history of butter tarts, and all that sort of stuff. And what, again, I think you said it at the beginning of the show. What really struck me about this is that butter tarts is something that unites Canadians from coast to coast. It doesn't matter who you voted for in the last election. People don't care. You and I could sit down and debate the merits of pecans and raisins all day long, and we'd still be friends at the end of the day. Right?
I'm crossing that off my question list. Okay, yes.
But it's true. It's one of those things that unites us as Canadians. It is something that is uniquely Canadian. And I honestly believe that this Butter Tart petition is going to start people talking again. And I actually know of someone who hasn't spoken to one of their relatives in a really long time because of politics. And they called them up and they said, where's mom's recipe? Where's that recipe? So it started a conversation. And I honestly believe that this petition, this idea, this celebration of National Butter Tart Day has the potential to unite us from coast to coast, to heal the country. Yesterday was April 19th, and I made 56 of Mary's original recipe butter tarts. We had company coming over, so I served them to company. And then in the afternoon, after our friends took off, my family and I walked around the neighborhood and shared them with our friends.
All right, April 19th, though. April 19th, her birthday, and that's the day you're hoping in the future we all set aside to make butter tarts or just to eat them. So this is where you're going with your petition?
Yeah. So it was actually April 19th, 1915. is the date that Mary McLeod, the original author, passed away.
Oh, she passed away.
And
Oops.
so I thought that, no, that's okay. Yeah. So I thought that would be a great day to have National Butter Tart Day, not just because it recognizes Mary's legacy and it celebrates the heritage of Canada and our pioneers, but the other reason is it's the start of the spring season. Flowers are starting to bloom. The birds are coming back. We're playing outside. We're enjoying the nice weather again. The outdoor markets are coming back. The farmers markets are coming back. This is the perfect time of year to start baking those butter tarts. And a lot of farmers markets sell butter tarts. So yeah, I just thought it's the perfect day to kind of kick off that whole season.
Okay, where do I sign up? How do I sign this petition?
You can go to ourcommons.ca/petitions and just type in E7213, that's the petition number, and you can add your name at the bottom to the list of signatures. You can also go to my Facebook page or my Instagram page. I've got a QR code on my Instagram page. You can just scan that code. It'll take you right to the signature page.
Or you can be like me and I just Googled Butter Tart Petition Canada, and I got to that E7213, our Commons, because I'm sure my listeners right now are saying, you expect me to remember that, Angela? I love it. I love it because I think of butter tarts as a Christmas thing. I always make my batch of butter tarts, but you've got me thinking about it year round now.
Yeah. Yeah, who doesn't think about them year round?
I know. I thought maybe you were just daydreaming about butter tarts there. John, thanks so much, and good luck with your effort.
You are quite welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, you bet. John Meissner. He is from Grimsby, Ontario, and he is behind the National Butter Tart Holiday, April 19th. I think as national days go, that's a pretty darn good one.